Thanks for tuning in to the Animal Control Report podcast, where we help debunk the dog catcher stereotype. A lot of times people think it's the dog catcher when they hear about animal control officers, but here on the Animal Control Report, we change that by taking you inside the day-to-day operations of animal control officers. Not only will you hear stories of animal control officers, but you'll hear from industry experts as well. We are also part of the Keep It Humane podcast network. We have some amazing partners there, so check them out at keepithumane.com/podcast network. You can listen to all the animal control and animal welfare related podcasts there. And let's continue to help people help animals. Welcome to another episode of, just kidding, the Animal Control Report of Silence. It was going to be of silence with your hosts,
Texas Bishop.
Well, today you're really just Ashley Bishop because you are Ashley Bishop and the other Ashley Bishop's on her way to Texas. So that's ironic.
It is. I wish I was going to see all of them, but you know, life.
Yeah. So, and Daniel Ettinger, I'm your other host. Check us out at keepithumane.com, keepithumane.com. Also check out all the fun stuff on that website. There's a lot of shopping. It'll redirect you. There's shopping on the website, but I actually just updated the eBay store because print on demand is the new way. So if you want something like whether you want this new t-shirt that I'm wearing, you can check that out on YouTube or Spotify and the video aspect. Print on demand is the way to go because you don't have to purchase inventory and, have just different sizes, different colors, just sitting in boxes. So whatever color you want, whatever style you want, go to the eBay store. You can either go through the website, keepithumane.com, or you can just go to eBay and put in Keep It Humane and find some of the available items. There's some really cute hats, some tumblers, some hoodies, some zip-up hoodies, all sorts of stuff. So check that out. And then don't forget to check out one of our sponsors, livetrap.com. Check them out. They have some great stuff. Whatever you need related to animal control equipment, it's there. So check it out, livetrap.com. Use discount code Keep It Humane for 10% off of your order. That's really, really goes a long way.
Don't forget, they also sell rescue.
Yeah.
They came out in clutch during COVID. So if you need rescue and you can't find it anywhere else, reach out to LiveTrap.
Yeah, they have it. LiveTrap has it. What else? There's some other maintenance stuff. Oh, we're part of that Keep It Humane podcast network. Everything's Keep It Humane. It's the podcast network. So if you want to see other podcasts that are related to animal welfare, check that out. So keepithumane.com/podcast network. Also, I just started a private group on Facebook, and it's the Smart Animal Shelter private Facebook group. And for those that don't know what SMART is or what it stands for, because we really don't talk about it, we need to do a full episode on SMART one of these days.
We sure do.
SMART stands for Saving More Animals Responsibly Together. So it was created in the, shadows of no-kill and all of this conversation about like save them all, etc. And we wanted to have something that really captured what we do without having to deal with the arbitrary number or the
stigma
of no-kill, right?
Yeah.
Because there's just some negative connotations and some siloing, and it's a lot of stuff. So check that out. That Facebook group, it's private, so you have to join, but it is Smart Animal Shelters on Facebook. So if you want to get in that conversation, holla. How are things in Texas, Bishop?
Weather's weird. It's kind of been all over the place. By now it's usually really hot. But we're getting a lot of rain, and I was just looking at my phone, and apparently there's hail a little bit north of us going on right now, so that's fun. It's just been a weird weather season the last couple of days, and hurricane season is upon us here shortly in a few weeks, so that's gonna be fun.
So you're close enough like to the Gulf to get hurricanes?
We're close enough to get like not the full brunt of it, but most of the rain and all of that. Houston is probably an hour away from where I'm at. So we feel a lot of the outer bands of larger storms and things like that. Harvey was a lot of fun. It was just raining 24/7. So, luckily we weren't as bad off, but we definitely felt the effects of that storm, and we definitely will feel effects for larger storms that will come on shore.
Okay. Wow. That's, I mean, I love storms. There's nothing like thunder and lightning through the night, but some people I'm sure don't love it.
A lot of dogs don't love it, as you and I am sure know.
Yeah. But as two of us in leadership, we wanted to talk about like what we would look for in an interview process for a new ACO, like somebody wanting to join our department. And we're going to keep it strict to animal control officers for this specific episode. And I think it starts with just like what are our minimum qualifications in a job posting, right? And how do you meet that to be even considered? And what should you do when you apply? So that's kind of the starting point. Uh, and you know, I think some of that is regulated by your HR, all that stuff, but
Mhm.
you can still have input as leadership. But from us, what are you looking for when you're recruiting new officers, Bishop?
Well, I've been doing this. I'm about to hit my seventh year, I think, as a supervisor for our department. And I think, I've learned a lot from the last couple of years. And um, my assistant supervisor, who is fantastic, who's been doing this for almost 18 years now.
Wow.
Her and I get together a lot. And, I tell her all the time, we are peas in a pod. We both bring a lot of our strength together and we can both really communicate really well. And I think what I've learned here, at least in the last 2 years or so, from us kind of going through the gambit after COVID and stuff, um, I love people who have animal experience, even if it went down to just, hey, I own cattle and horses and, whatever the case might be as far as something off the beaten path. But sometimes it's also kind of good to hire somebody who's a little green,
Yeah.
Dan. I'm not gonna lie. I think a lot for our department, it's them realizing through the interview kind of what we go through on a daily basis. A lot of, as you and I both know, there's no manual in our in our industry. There's nothing really because everybody has so many ideas. There's just not one thing that everybody does, I feel like personally, that just kind of sets everybody on the same path because everybody does everything so different. So a lot of what we tell everybody is that, you learn a lot on the job. I can't just tell you that this one situation is going to be like this all the time because in reality, you and I both know it's not. It can be different every single time. It might be the same situation, but when you go on there or you go to that call, it's always different. So for me as a supervisor, it's really trying to ask the right questions to see how their mind thinks and how they would fit in the equation for our department. Does that make sense?
Well, it does absolutely, and you took it a little step further um, than I was going with my initial thought. And because the reason I
Sorry.
say that is there is no standard across the
Mhm.
board for minimum qualifications, right? And I'm going to use my old agency, Denver. I use them a lot. I was there a long time though, so that's why I use them a lot. Shout out Denver. So their minimum cues now, you have to have at minimum a 4-year degree, or or you can have like an equivalency. So you can have 4 years or so many years of animal control experience to get hired on. So basically, their department's only accepting people with a degree or actual experience. I don't love that. I don't.
Interesting.
I think it I love it for the way they get paid because I think they start at like 34 an hour. Like they're getting paid. Yeah, I know. They're getting paid great. So like I get it from that aspect, but all of their staff members, all of their officers, except for their two lead officers, are called animal control officer twos. There are no ones. It makes no sense to my brain. It hurts my
Mhm.
brain. Um, yeah, I know. The look on your face right now is classic. It hurts my brain. But my point is, so that's the minimum quals there. Most animal control jobs like just require GED,
Mhm.
18 years or older, maybe some are 21 years or older. And then you have to have like a valid driver's license, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
those are kind of the minimum qualifications for this job. It's a very entry level job in most organizations. And then you learn as you go. One of the things that we talk about, like when applying for a job, usually, unless you're going through a nonprofit, so a humane society to be an animal humane agent or however it would be called, usually like that's a little bit different, but everywhere else is going to be through uh yep,
Municipality or government.
yep, yep. So governmentjobs.com typically.
Yeah.
And there's a cool job board. As a card carrying NACA member, you can go to NACAnet.org, I believe, NACAnet.org, and they have a good job board. They actually do have a good job board. And that's open to everybody, not even a card carrying member like myself. Uh, so like, but most of the jobs that you find are on governmentjobs.com. And so there's a whole process going through that, right? You have to set up your profile with it's almost having to duplicate your resume because you're doing
Essentially.
all of that through there.
Yep.
But one of the things that is important for you as a new, maybe you're not just a new officer, but you want to like move to another department, right? I think it's really important. So you apply, make sure you have a specific targeted objective. So, like, my objective is to maintain health and safety of animals within Brownsville, Texas, right? Something like that. And then just make sure everything is current. You don't want to have something on your resume that's like your objective, say, like, want to be the team sales leader at Target when you're applying for animal control. I've seen all that stuff, right? Uh,
Yeah. Make sure your resume and your answers are geared towards what you're applying for. I think it's very important.
Absolutely. Make sure, right? Make sure your references are up to date and knowledged that you are actually applying for jobs, right? Because if I get a phone call from one of my, people that I'm a reference for, and I'm just like, I mean, I'd probably be surprised, but I'd be able to play it off pretty quickly. Like, okay, cool, yeah, 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 they're great. But like, make sure they have an update, like, hey, I'm applying for this job, et cetera, et cetera. And so that way, everything is good to go. Be ready to go and like have a good outfit picked for your interview, whether it's in person or virtually. Don't show up in this awesome Keep It Humane t-shirt
I mean,
because
or do.
even even though it's great, and if I interviewed you, I would hire you on the spot. That's not work attire, right? You want to dress a little better than what the job is. And so wearing a uniform, wearing like a really nice, whether it's a skirt suit, is that a thing? A skirt?
I mean, it was back in the 50s, but I don't know if people do that anymore. I will say on the subject really quick, have you noticed that the attire for interviews has dramatically changed in the last 2 years?
I'm seeing people show up in pandas, like Nike pandas. I'm like, okay, Vans. They're out there in Vans and Converse. Uh,
I
this generation, man.
It is. It's very interesting to see what we're getting when people come in for interviews because even me still now, I'm gonna show up in my little pumps, even though I don't wear pumps at work anytime. We're
No,
in animal control. But yeah, it's wardrobe. It's important, y'all. It's real important.
facts. It is. Good point. So, be willing to maybe spend a little more to get it, or just show up and look presentable because you're gonna have to, wear a uniform, have that. There's an expectation to have that clean, etc. So that's all the preliminary stuff. Please do this though, no matter
Yes.
what you do. No matter what you do, whatever job you're applying for, take five, I don't care if it's 5 minutes. I would like it to be a little more, but know a little bit about the agency that you're applying for. The amount of people that don't know diddly squat when going through an interview just blows my mind. Even if it's something that like is as simple as like, I was on your website and I saw that you offer a low cost vaccine clinic once a month or something like that. Thank you for seeing that. Thank you for putting in the research to an agency that you might want to join, right? Or, hey, your mission, I saw that your mission statement said to protect the health and safety of animals while maintaining a safe community through education, outreach, and enforcement. Now, you may not know it verbatim, but thank you for saying, like, yeah, when I was on your website, I saw your mission was pretty in line with what my personal values are. Like, I like to help people help animals, and it seems like that's what you're all about, right? Reference that. I drove by your shelter and I saw that you have a lot of outdoor kennels. How does that work? Have those questions prepared at the end. There's nothing worse than, so do you have any questions?
I'm so glad that you brought that up because we are the same. Like we love people who are engaged, even if you don't, and to be honest too, if even if you don't know anything about the industry, like ask those questions. If you've never done anything like this before, but maybe you've been in law enforcement or maybe you've done 20 years in the military, a lot of those structural things can really help a department out. Ask those questions, well, what is a daily, what is your daily life like at your job, or what do you personally love about your job? I love those questions. They're the best, and we're very honest and we're very thorough in our interview process because let's keep it real, our jobs are hard.
They are. And so that, yeah, like as we walk through that process, like get your research, come up with 3 to 5 questions. You don't have to ask them all, but as you get ready to go into that interview, do not, and I repeat, do not ask in your first round of interviews and the questions, how much am I going to get paid? I don't want to hear that. Do not ask what days you're going to have off. I also don't want to hear that, right? That's second round interview stuff, right? You're not asking that right out the gate. You are showing interest in the job, but not to the level that you're actually being considered for the position. So just chill out, okay? As we get to this stage of like, all right, now we got to do the interview. Arrive early. So if the interview's at noon, which would be weird because that would be lunchtime. If the interview's at 9 a.m., get there at 8:45. Okay. Do not get there at 9:02. Don't get there at 8:57. Get there about 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes early. Be patient. You can be on your phone in the lobby reading research, right? Don't be on TikTok, Tinder, what's the other one called? Bumble. Like,
Bumble.
be on be on that website of the agency, be on their social media page. Hey, I saw you posted this really cool social media thing about a dog that was at your shelter for 373 days and then it got adopted last week.
Oh
That's
God.
cool. So do your research. Question for you, Ashley.
Hmm.
What's your take on people bringing their resume into the interview or bringing a folder, taking notes, that stuff?
I personally love it, because it tells me that you're very interested, first of all, that you're really wanting to, like, maybe you forget things sometimes and you just kind of need to make sure that you have all the information down, whether it's a contact number or email address. I always love having resumes on hand as well. For all I know, maybe they changed up their resume a little, and I've had that happen before where
So you like getting something.
um
Does it matter to you if the resume is printed on plain white paper from the Xerox machine, or do you want it on heavy, you know,
yeah,
cardstock paper?
I don't go that far.
Yeah,
Yeah, as long as I get a as long as I get a copy of it, you bring it in and you're ready, because
yeah.
I've noticed too here recently that a lot of people don't attach their references.
Mm. Hmm.
It's just the resume, and then you have to ask for them.
Yeah.
I'm in the era of like, here is everything that you need is here are my references, here's everything, my cover letter, whatever, here it is. I don't get a lot of that anymore.
And I think we're in that digital age where people don't think that it still goes a long way. But you have to remember, you might be in that digital age. The people that are hiring you, we're
Or
both
not.
gray. You and I are both long in the tooth, if you will. Um, so that will make an impact. Whether I
Hmm.
look at it or not, you're giving something, right? There's
Hmm.
hand to hand. And I'm okay with, even you having that notebook, don't bring in a raggedy ass notebook that has like stickers all over it, unless they're Keep It Humane stickers. But don't, no, seriously, bring in like a nice, just something that's clean, whether it's like,
A folio, like,
yeah, yep. And you can ask, like, is it okay if I take notes during this process? You can ask. Like, that's nothing wrong with that. Um, at all. So I appreciate that insight there because I think that's important and we lose sight of that. So as you sit down, right, remember to breathe. Remember to this is the little interview techniques, but like don't sit if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, if you can see me right now, I'm leaned all the way back with my arms folded crossed. You don't want to do that. You want to put your hands typically on the table, um, or you can have them like you can have them on your lap. There are some interview gurus that say like you want to have your hands visible to show that you have nothing to hide. So it just depends on the situation. Clearly, if you have a notebook or something in that nature, having your hand on the notebook or your pen somewhere where they're visible, but no arms crossed. You're not slouching. You're not leaned back in the chair, that type of stuff. You just want to be attentive. And you don't want to directly like stare at people in the eyes. Like if there's multiple interviews and the interviewers in the panel, uh, make eye contact.
please,
Yeah, please make eye contact.
please.
Um, and make sure that you're using your minimal body encouragers, you're not stiff, etc. It can be nerve-wracking. And you could say, hey, I'm a little nervous, just wanted to let you know. Like you can make jokes like that stuff is absolutely applicable. Like we don't expect people to come into an interview and be like completely um not nervous. There's a word for that, but I don't know what it is. Just completely relaxed.
Yeah.
Unless you're in California, you smoke a lot of weed before you come in. So what let's jump into like so like usually the first interview question is something like tell us a little bit about yourself and why you think you're a good candidate for this position. Right? So that's where you're going to list all your experiences and stuff like that. But what are some maybe questions you like to ask in your interviews?
My favorite question, and if everybody doesn't have this on their interview question list, you need to because it says a lot about a person. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And how do you overcome and compensate for those weaknesses?
Mm.
It tells us a lot about how they can deal with stress if they have situations that come in. Maybe, I've gotten a lot of, uh, I don't like when I don't have a list of things to do on a certain day. Or my weakness is, sometimes I get overwhelmed and I don't know how to process those things. Um, the one answer I do not like is I don't have any weaknesses. And
Even Mooney agrees with that.
I
Yeah, Mooney.
you can always feel the vibe when we get that answer in the interview because even we as a supervisor, I can list off so many weaknesses that I have. Everybody has a weakness. We are not impervious to the job force or what we do on a daily basis. So if you do get that question, don't answer it. I don't have any weaknesses.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, we all do, and it's like that. People think, look, it's an interesting like not concept, but an interesting prospect as far as like interviewing and people. It's your chance to brag about yourself.
Mhm.
And I know we do this podcast, and I know people think that I have a certain personality because I like to teach classes. I'm actually an introvert. I don't like to talk about myself. I really don't. I know there's certain people, and I'm not going to say any names. They may be part of our podcast network that is always taking selfies of themselves. They love them some them. I'm just going to keep it 100. That's not me though. And so in an interview process, it's actually kind of hard to humbly brag. It really is. And so I think it's okay for you to know that like it's expected for you to tell there's two ways to do it, right? You can be arrogant, like I'm the best at everything, or you could say like, look, I've I've accomplished these things. I'm really proud of these accomplishments. I'm very driven by my my work success and these aspects, and these mean a lot to me. These mean a lot, and I'm happy that I've been able to be part of a good team, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really important to make sure you brag humbly about your accomplishments, because we want to know what you've done. And what's really important in this profession, most of you work with a team, right? But this job is very isolated. There's not a lot of crossover in a lot of ways. You're out in the field, usually by yourself, et cetera. So you have to be able to highlight both of those. Like, hey, I worked on this project with a group, but then I was able to handle this type of call solo, right? So those are some things that just to keep in mind as you're going through it. What about the scenario-based questions? We all have them, and it seems like we have them, but everybody I talk to seems to have a different answer. And I'm going to give you the scenario-based question. Okay.
Oh no.
So you get a call for you're en route, you're in the field, whatever, however you want to word it. And you get dispatched to three calls. One is um, a dog hit by car, like in a neighborhood. Okay. Two is a dog on school grounds, and three is there's a stray dog in custody, but it's with like a city council member. And those are the three calls. How do you prioritize those calls? Your face.
Ooh, I, for one, and me and my department, I would say that middle call right there. There is a dog actively on a school ground. I think I would do that, then injured dog, then council member. But depending on your department is how you will
And I
take those.
agree, but I 100% agree with you, right? Because I think that like public safety is still the number one priority of our job, right? Like
Mhm.
that's where we're designed from. That's what we're objectives really are. You could argue that the hit by car could be a public safety issue, but and what is actually cool is at least when somebody is like, look, if I was the officer handling this, I would probably get more information. So I would call a few of these people en route, right? So the hit by car, I might call right away and say like, hey, tell me more. What's going on? What kind of
Mhm.
dog? Blah, blah, blah. Or the school, hey, what kind of dog is it? What's going on? And then I could officially make a decision based on more information. And it's okay to ask that question in the interview. Now you may get the answer, hey, like, uh, that's all the information you have. Like, I'm sorry, there's no further info. What you have is what you have, right? And so that's fine. And then I would answer it based on public safety first. And I don't care what politician you are in that aspect. Like, sorry, bro. Like, this is what it is. Um, we're gonna get you last because these priority calls are first and foremost.
Agreed. I think scenario, I don't know if you feel like this, Dan, or if you've ever said in an interview where somebody asked a scenario question because of things that have already happened in the department.
Oh yeah.
I have one of those on there.
Uh-oh.
I mean, it's not bad, but it's just, these days I feel like emotional intelligence is very important, whether you realize it or not. So
Mhm.
our big scenario question and how people answer this is, so it's after hours,
Mhm.
and we only have certain calls that we respond to because we're not a 24-hour department. So we have our, list of calls that we respond to, but you have somebody who keeps calling over and over because they feel like the situation that they have is dire, but it doesn't
Uh-huh.
fit into our category. What do you do? And every time I get an answer of, well, we don't respond to those calls.
Hmm.
So I'm going to just gently, politely tell them, no, we're not responding. And then I ask the question, well, what if they call again?
Mm.
What do you do? And, this situation for our department was a big learning thing for me as well, because it was right when I first started. If the officer would have just went out and handled it at that point in time, we should have been fine and dandy. rather
Yeah.
than it turning into a very large scale, supervisor myself had to respond out the next day type deal, at that point, make the emotional, intelligent decision to go out there, handle the situation. You're gonna get paid for it. Well, at least in my department, you will.
Yeah.
You're gonna get paid for you're gonna get paid for the time that you are out there. And I'm not gonna be mad as your supervisor for handling that situation the way you did
Yeah.
because you emotionally handled it in a positive manner, whether or not it's part of policy or not.
Mhm. And I think that leads to like further stuff. I think we could do a whole program on discretion and in that aspect of the job for sure. Right. Uh,
Yeah.
are there any other interview questions that you think get people hung up? Or, I mean, to me, again, to highlight some of the things, like make sure you know about the agency you're applying for, because they may ask you, what are our values and standards? Or what do you know about the department? Those type of things. Like, I love that question because it tells me, especially as an investigator, I want somebody that comes into this job with that knowledge, not even knowledge, that innate ability to be an investigator. Some people have it and some people have to learn it, right?
Correct.
So yeah, from interview questions, I don't know. I think the other biggest one that is probably on everybody's interview questionnaire is, please tell us a time about you've had conflict with a coworker, and what was the conflict and how were you able to resolve it, etc. I think everybody has that on their questions. So be prepared to answer that going into an interview. Come up with that scenario, think about it before you go there, and that way you can answer it pretty easily. Sometimes it's hard because you're putting yourself, you're being vulnerable in that situation. Like, hey, this was on me. I'll tell you a story about this dude named fuck you. I hope you're listening too. Keep it 100 on this show, man. Y'all don't want this cookie cutter bullshit.
I just
Fuck,
want to see that.
fuck out of here, little rookie ass animal control officer. Um, he was trash, but he was smart enough. He was smart enough to like seem like he was a good officer. That dude was garbage, and he and I had conflict, and he and I had conflict because, as a senior officer at that agency, I it's probably my own fault. I used to be the lead FTO, but I during my last few years I resigned as that, and that we can get into that as another topic. But our team was like, with all these new people coming in, we had to like rush them through. And so I remember the person being the FTO was like, if there's stuff that's happening with these new people, please reach out to them directly. Like, they were all copied on it. So I wasn't doing anything that was against policy. Like, I wasn't trying to be hard on somebody. And so I emailed this dude a few times. And he's my age too, but he came into the job pretty new. So he didn't have the background, but he had the ego of like, no one is going to tell me what to do. And we'll get into that in a second. Um, and so I was just really trying to help provide guidance, like, hey, man, I noticed on X we didn't do this, and it's really critical for a case that we're working on. I just wanted to give you a heads up. But it really pissed him off because I copied the lieutenant at the time. Like, I copied our supervisor on something that he put out. He made a policy, and so I wanted to make sure like I wasn't missing anything. And this dude took it so personal. Like, he called me on the phone and was like, just like, how phone conversations can be different than in-person conversations. He called me on the phone and he was barking in my ear. And I was like, why don't you just come back so we can have like a face-to-face conversation, and maybe we can work this out as adults, right? Like, I was trying to be come up conflict resolution. I wasn't trying to continue this thing. And this dude, like, for whatever reason, he just got stuck on like, well, and he's right. I will tell you this. He was right. By Remember, I told you everybody comes in as an ACO2 at that agency, right?
Mhm.
So he was technically the same position, but I also had like 12 years of experience, right? And so I was like, look, man, you're right. You and I are equals. I get that. But I'm just trying to give guidance to help you as a brand. Like, dude had less than a year on the job. He was like 6 months, if that. I was like, I'm just trying to help you. And he said something that I'll never forget. He was like, well, it's about your ego. And I was like, hey, I was like, okay, like you could say that, but we all have egos. And he literally was like, I don't have an ego. And I was like, wait, what? Everyone has an ego. That is your identity. Like we all have it. And that pretty much told me everything I needed to know about dude, who ended up quitting abruptly, etc. And so like I I don't know, man. I feel like that conflict was never resolved. So that is an example of something I wouldn't use in an interview, but there are plenty that I would use. I will say I could use it as like I tried my hardest to be, uh, to be what's the word? Like I didn't take it personally. I was just trying to help him. I couldn't get him to de-escalate. Like he was way up here and I was down here, and I couldn't understand like he was so angry that I copied the lieutenant that I don't know, like even apologizing and saying, "Hey man, I wasn't copying him to try to get you in trouble. I was copying him because you were not in that meeting and maybe he had more insight on that process that we're doing." And maybe I shouldn't have done that. So maybe that's the takeaway is like hindsight being 2020, I should have just had a direct email conversation with him or a personal conversation like when the next time I saw him. But that I never had conflict with anybody else ever in this profession, like as a coworker. That was so like this guy made it feel so personal. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever felt with or dealt with in my career. And so I use that as an example of like sometimes our conflict is not going to resolve itself, but you can still talk about, well, I tried this, and this, and I was unsuccessful if that's all you had. But I've had others.
Yeah, I think we kind of do a little loop de loop on that question. For us, it's what are the things in the workplace that cause you stress and how do you deal with that stress?
I love that
And
question. Yeah.
yeah, usually 8 out of 10 times it's usually, conflict with coworkers, or,
Mm,
how I work is different how somebody else works. And I will say on the point that Dan was making, everybody needs to realize as well that business is business, and you
mm,
have to be able to take constructive criticism at work. Like it's just you have to, especially in this industry. You have to always be able to learn and grow. I think for me personally, and what I tell my staff all the time is, "Hey, man, I'm getting old. If I forget I told you to do this, and then all of a sudden the next day I said, "Hey, man, let's try it this way," then say, "Hey, Ashley, what's going on? What the hell? You said to do it this way yesterday, but now we're changing it up. Call me out." Because I need to be not necessarily humbled, but sometimes I need to be reminded
well, and there's
of
that
things.
there's that terminology that I've heard and I've used is it's okay to manage up, right? So it's okay. And I tell the staff,
Yeah.
our current staff now, I tell them all the time, like, look, I know I'm not perfect. So,
Mm-mm.
and I have some really good officers that will they they we just were able to talk through shit. And so like it's never for the most part, it's never one-sided where I'm like, you need to go do this. There may be, I first off, I would never say it to them like that. But like there for the most part, it's like, hey, what do you think on this? Like, let's talk through it. What do you guys think? What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And then we come up with a resolution. So um as we digress into some of the other stuff, I want to get back into like the finalizing of the interview process. So it's you leave the interview. Hopefully, you're a good investigator. Maybe you wrote down their names. Maybe you asked them for their email address. How for you for an animal control officer position? How important is it that you get a thank you email from the candidate?
I I like getting the follow up because we require now, after, since I took over, to do ride alongs.
Okay.
It's a requirement. If you're going
That's
to be a
great. Yeah.
candidate, yeah, if you're going to be a candidate that, we're pushing forward, essentially we use that as the second, interview, so they can see what everything's all about. And I don't know that it's necessarily important, but it also says a lot about their character, I believe, for us.
And I also want to say that like it just shows that you've done your due diligence.
Hmm.
It's easy to track down email addresses. Most email addresses from agencies, like they're pretty standard. So it's either like first initial, first name dot last name at whatever organization it is. So it shouldn't be that hard to find an email address and reach out to somebody. And it just shows follow through. I think for a regular ACO1 position, it's not required. I would say like I wouldn't make a decision just based on that alone, but like as you start to progress in your career and move up the ladder, as you get into like supervisory positions, it does show, just good technique and skill that you can put together good sentences and paragraphs, um, and really have a strong, strong like chance and really show your enthusiasm. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on it. Like these jobs aren't that frequent. And if it's something you really want to do, again, put in your research, come up with good questions, be prepared, right? And I like how you said come to the interview with a notebook and your resume. I think that's really important as well.
And questions, y'all. Questions are important, even if you don't think the question is, super important or whatever. Come with questions, be educated about everything. I will say in our interview process too, we kind of lay it on pretty thick. Um, because we really want people to understand, what our daily job is and how things are run and kind of the history of our agency. So, we're pretty thorough on saying, hey, this is, kind of how we do things, this is how we work together, this is what our goals are and what we see in 5-10 years of our agency.
Yeah. And don't be cynical like me.
At least not in the interview.
I'll tell you
Maybe
right
later.
now, look, that's a whole nother program about burnout. Um, but burnout happens in different ways, or not happens. Well, yeah, it happens, but it also presents itself in different ways. And some days are better than others, and today's just not a good day. So all my F words, I apologize for using that profanity on the program. I really don't apologize because this is our program and we do whatever the fuck we want here on the Animal Control Report podcast. So we appreciate you listening. We really do. We appreciate you checking out our Facebook page, Instagram, website, share, like, rate, do all the stuff so we can continue to bring this podcast to you. We're excited to continue to grow this thing. So thank you for listening, and let's help people help animals and
Oh,
keep it humane.
I almost, I'm gonna be OG Bishop, and I'm always gonna miss it too, probably.